congratulate others who have taken this step. South Africa reiterates its firm commitment to the creation of a contiguous Palestinian state existing peacefully side by side with the State of Israel along the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. South Africa condemned the 7th October attacks by Hamas that resulted in the deaths of more than 1,200 people. In response to this attack, Israel has unleashed disproportionate punishment against the people of Palestine. And we say here today that the only solution to this conflict is a two-state solution. The viability of a two-state solution depends on full and universal respect for international law. All states, including the State of Israel, must comply with the collective obligations under international law. As the UN marks the 80th anniversary, we call on all member states to recognize Palestine and to act in solidarity with its people. To restore the prospects of a two-state solution, we call, firstly, for global recognition of Palestine and its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Secondly, the immediate ceasefire and an end to the genocide and the release of hostages by Hamas and prisoners by Israel. Thirdly, the full respect for international law, including the respect for UN resolutions and opinions and the decisions of the International Court of Justice. Fourthly, the removal of obstacles to the two-state solution, including a halt to illegal settlements and removal of the separation wall. Lastly, the restoration of the humanitarian aid and reconstruction of Gaza. This is a conflict that has gone on for almost as long as the United Nations has existed. And we say that as the international community, this conflict must end now, and we as the international community must act now also in unison. We must now work together to achieve a just and peaceful and lasting solution. I would like to welcome the demonstrable groundswell of support for the establishment of the much-awaited state of Palestine by 142 nations.
The speaker's microphone has been cut off.
You must have watched the video of President Cyril Ramaphosa standing at the United Nations General Assembly, voice raised, hands moving sharply, anger visible in every line of his face. And then, suddenly, the mic goes dead. The sound cuts off. A room full of world leaders looks puzzled, some trying not to laugh, others pretending not to notice. A sitting president of South Africa, silenced in front of the entire globe, in the middle of one of his most fiery speeches. Now, let's unpack what really happened, because this moment was not just a technical glitch, and it was not just about Cyril Ramaphosa having his mic turned off. It tells us something bigger about South Africa's position on global politics, about how the world reacts when smaller or middle powers speak against the interests of the powerful, and about the new personality Ramaphosa is trying to project to the international community. At the core of it, Ramaphosa was attacking Israel over the ongoing war in Gaza, calling out what he described as state-sanctioned violence and accusing global powers of applying double standards. He didn't mince words. Gone was the calm, often hesitant Ramaphosa we know at home, who sometimes spends 2 hours saying what could have been said in 10 minutes. No, this time, he was sharp, aggressive, and visibly furious. And this, at the UN stage, is unusual for him. The president has often tried to present himself as a bridge builder, someone who avoids open confrontation. But in this speech, his gloves came off. Then, as if on cue, the sound dropped. The official explanation from UN technicians was that it was a technical malfunction. But let's be honest, the timing could not have been worse, or, depending on your view, more convenient. A South African president criticizing Israel in such strong language, and suddenly no one can hear him. Social media, of course, exploded. People in South Africa started joking that the West had found the mute button for Ramaphosa. Memes appeared showing him shouting silently like a frustrated football coach whose team refuses to score. But humor aside, there is a very serious angle here. South Africa has been one of the loudest voices at the International Court of Justice, pushing the case that Israel's actions in Gaza amount to genocide. The ANC government has taken strong steps, from cutting diplomatic ties to pushing resolutions at the African Union and the BRICS bloc. To supporters, this is principled leadership, a moral stand against injustice. To critics, it's political theater, meant to distract from the chaos back home, load shedding, unemployment, and failing municipalities. So, when Ramaphosa raised his voice at the UN, he wasn't just venting. He was reinforcing South Africa's image as a champion of the global South, a country willing to speak truth to power. But being cut off, whether deliberate or accidental, sent a message of its own, that such voices are sometimes unwelcome in the very halls that claim to represent all nations. Let's not forget, this isn't the first time world leaders have been silenced or ignored in similar ways. Years ago, Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez famously called George W. Bush the devil at the UN. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, Iran's former president, had half the assembly walk out when he spoke. And of course, African leaders often complain that their voices are sidelined in major global debates. Ramaphosa, whether he realized it or not, joined that long list when his mic went dark. Now, the irony is rich here. Back in South Africa, Ramaphosa often avoids microphones. He cancels press briefings, delays speeches, and prefers carefully managed statements. Yet, at the UN, when he finally lets loose, when he shows anger and conviction, suddenly the world cannot hear him. Maybe that's the universe playing a joke. Or maybe it's the politics of sound, who gets heard, who gets silenced, and who controls the volume knob. What's also fascinating is how this incident has played at home. Among his supporters, especially within the ANC, this was seen as proof that Ramaphosa is standing firm against imperialism. They say, look, even when they cut him off, he still spoke the truth. Among his critics, particularly the DA and other opposition parties, the reaction was more cynical. Why is Ramaphosa so loud about Gaza but so quiet about the collapse of our own municipalities? Why shout in New York when you whisper in Tshwane? And here's where the story really gets juicy. Because this is not just about foreign policy, it's about domestic politics. Ramaphosa is heading into a period where he needs to show leadership, to prove he is not just a caretaker president but someone with conviction. By attacking Israel so openly, he is trying to rally support among South Africans who sympathize with the Palestinian cause. This issue has deep emotional and historical resonance here. Remember, the ANC often draws parallels between apartheid and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. By making this his stage, Ramaphosa ties his presidency to that legacy of struggle. But there's a risk. The world is divided on this issue. South Africa's strong stance could isolate it diplomatically, especially from Western nations who are major investors and trade partners. Already, whispers in diplomatic circles suggest that Pretoria may face quiet punishments, reduced aid, limited trade talks, and exclusion from certain forums. If that happens, ordinary South Africans could end up paying the price for a moral stand. Yet, for Ramaphosa, the gamble may be worth it. After all, domestically he is accused of being too weak, too indecisive. A fiery speech, even one cut short by a dead mic, shows a different side of him. It shows a leader willing to shout, even if the world refuses to listen. Now, let's circle back to the humor, because South Africans always find humor in chaos. Twitter was full of jokes. Someone wrote, "Stage 6 load shedding has reached New York." Another said, "Even the UN knows when Cyril is about to waffle." And, of course, a few EFF supporters claimed the mic cut was proof that Ramaphosa was being censored because he dared to speak truth to the West. But behind the laughter lies a real question: can South Africa afford to keep playing this role? Can it afford to be the loud voice of conscience when its own house is in disarray? Some argue that by taking moral leadership abroad, Ramaphosa distracts from his failures at home. Others counter that this is exactly what South Africa must do: use its history of resistance to apartheid as a platform to call out injustice anywhere in the world. One thing is clear, that speech, even in silence, has already achieved what Ramaphosa wanted. It made headlines. It put South Africa back at the center of the global debate on Gaza. And it forced everyone to notice that, whether you like it or not, Pretoria is not afraid to shout, even if the mic gets cut. So, in the end, maybe the sound failure wasn't a failure at all. Maybe it was symbolic. A reminder that voices of resistance are often muted, but never truly silenced. And for Ramaphosa, it was the rare moment where his frustration broke through the careful diplomacy, where he looked less like a cautious businessman president and more like an angry activist. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into South African and global politics, and drop a comment below. Do you think the mic cut was an accident, or do you think someone wanted Ramaphosa muted? Let me know your thoughts. See you next time.